Commander Talon Kresh floated in the zero-gravity command chamber of the massive Vorthon warship Deathbringer, his scaled hands gripping the control rails as he stared at the three-dimensional star map spinning before him. The holographic display cast an eerie blue glow across his reptilian features, highlighting the battle scars that crisscrossed his face from decades of conquest. "Another day, another world to claim," he muttered. But his confidence wavered as he focused on one particular system, Sol. The third planet from its yellow star had been marked in the galactic database for over 3,000 years, yet somehow remained unclaimed. Sub-Commander Nix Valder drifted closer, her tentacles twitching nervously as she manipulated the data streams flowing through her neural interface. Her purple skin had turned a darker shade, indicating stress among her species. "Admiral, I've reviewed the tactical assessments 17 times. The results are ... impossible." Red eyes, each the size of a human fist, focused on his aide. "Explain." Valder's tentacles danced across the holographic controls, bringing up detailed scans of Earth. "This planet called Earth shows no orbital defense platforms, no energy shields protecting the atmosphere, no particle beam weapons. Their most advanced spacecraft barely reached their own moon using primitive chemical rockets that our ancestors abandoned millennia ago." The display zoomed in, showing grainy footage intercepted from human military broadcasts. Soldiers in camouflage uniforms ran through training exercises, firing weapons that shot small metal projectiles. One soldier, identified by intercepted communications as Haiyan Wu, demonstrated what humans called a rifle to his companion, Donghae. The weapon's projectile moved so slowly that even a Vorthan child could dodge it. "Look at this," Valder continued, her voice rising with disbelief. "Their soldiers wear fabric armor that wouldn't stop a training blade. Their vehicles move on wheels instead of hovering. They communicate using electromagnetic waves that any first-year cadet could intercept." Kresh studied the footage with growing confusion. In his 40 years of military service, he had conquered worlds defended by plasma cannons that could melt asteroids, energy barriers that could deflect entire fleets, and warriors who could survive in the vacuum of space. Yet here was a world that seemed defenseless by even the most primitive standards. "Perhaps they hide their true strength," he suggested, though his tone lacked conviction. "No, Admiral." Dalder brought up more data streams. "Our deep space scanners show no hidden bases on their moon, no cloaked weapons platforms, no antimatter stockpiles. Their largest explosives are crude nuclear devices that produce less energy than our personal sidearms." The command chamber fell silent, except for the low hum of the ship's massive engines. Around them, other Vorthan officers at their stations paused their work to listen. The bridge crew of the Deathbringer had participated in the conquest of 47 star systems. They had seen civilizations that fought with robots the size of mountains, energy beings that could possess entire fleets, and insectoid swarms that numbered in the billions. Yet none of them could explain why such an apparently helpless world remained untouched. "Check the galactic conquest records," Kresh ordered. "Who else has surveyed this system?" Balder's neural interface glowed brighter as she accessed the central databases. The hegemony recorded 3 separate reconnaissance missions to the Sol system over the past century. Each time, they classified the world as cataloged but unprocessed and moved on. "The hegemony conquers everything," Kresh said slowly. "They've enslaved gas giants for their mineral cores and harvested entire star systems for energy. Why would they ignore such easy prey?" "It gets stranger, Admiral. The Razor Clan surveyed Earth 50 years ago. Their report simply reads not target with no explanation." The crystalline accord passed through the system twice. The Phantom Legion marked it as a void unless necessary. Kresh felt a chill run down his spine. The Phantom Legion feared nothing in the known galaxy. They were energy beings who could possess entire worlds, turning populations into their unwilling armies. If they recommended avoiding Earth, there had to be a reason. "Show me their current military capabilities again," he commanded. The holographic display shifted to show human military installations. Bases with concrete walls that could be destroyed by a single plasma blast. Aircraft that moved slower than cargo shuttles. ships on their oceans made of metal that would disintegrate under basic energy weapons. Their population is only 7 billion, Valdor added, spread across multiple continents with no unified government. They fight among themselves using those primitive projectile weapons. By all calculations, a single Vorthon battalion could conquer their entire world in less than one standard day. Yet something nagged at Kresh's mind. In his experience, when something seemed too easy in the galaxy, it usually was. He had seen too many civilizations that appeared weak, but possessed hidden strengths. The silicon-based life forms of Kepler-78 had looked like simple rock formations until they revealed their ability to manipulate gravity itself. The peaceful traders of the Vega system had turned out to be master strategists who could predict enemy movements years in advance. Admiral called out Navigation Officer Zex Thane from his station. "We're receiving a priority transmission from High Command." The view screen shimmered to life, revealing the imposing figure of Supreme Admiral Corvin Vex, Supreme Commander of the Vorthon Dominion's military forces. His massive form filled the screen, battle armor gleaming with the metals. "Of 100 conquered worlds, Kresh." Vex's voice boomed through the chamber. "Status report on the Sol system evaluation. Supreme Admiral, preliminary scans show the target world is virtually defenseless. However, the lack of previous claims by other species is ... unusual." Vex's expression darkened. "Unusual how?" "Multiple major powers have surveyed the system but declined to conquer it. The reasons are unclear." For a moment, Vex was silent. When he spoke again, his voice carried a warning tone that Kresh had rarely heard. "Commander, in my 300 years of service, I've learned that when something in this galaxy doesn't make sense, there's usually a very good reason. Proceed with extreme caution." The transmission ended, leaving Kresh staring at the tactical display of Earth. Somewhere on that blue world, humans named Haiyan Wu and Donghae were probably still running their training exercises, unaware that one of the galaxy's most powerful military forces was studying their every move. "Deploy reconnaissance drones," Kresh finally ordered. "Full spectrum analysis. I want to know everything about this world and why it remains untouched. Something doesn't add up, and I intend to find out what." As the Deathbringer moved closer to the Sol system, none of its crew could have imagined that they were about to discover the most terrifying secret in the galaxy. The 3 Vorthon scout ships sliced through Earth's upper atmosphere like silver daggers, their adaptive camouflage systems shimmering as they adjusted to match the blue sky. Admiral Kresh watched from his command ship as the smaller vessels deployed their full stealth arrays. Confident that the primitive humans below would never detect their presence, Lieutenant Cassandra Voss monitored the infiltration from her station. Aboard the lead scout ship Silent Fang, her purple tentacles danced across the bioneural interface as she calibrated the ship's sensors to scan the planet's surface. Everything had been going according to plan until her console erupted in warning lights. "What in the void?" she muttered, her large black eyes widening in disbelief. The detection grid on her screen lit up like a festival display, showing dozens of tracking signals locking onto their position. Back on the Deathbringer, Admiral Kresh felt his confidence evaporate as alarms began blaring throughout the command. "Center, report." He barked. "Sir, we're being tracked by ground-based detection arrays," Voss reported, her voice tight with confusion. "Multiple radar installations across the planet have acquired targeting locks on all 3 scout ships. They detected us the moment we entered their atmosphere." Sub-Commander Valder's tentacles turned a darker shade of purple as she accessed the tactical database. "Admiral, this is impossible. Our stealth technology can fool hegemony sensors. How could these primitives detect us?" Kresh studied the incoming data streams. The humans were using what appeared to be crude electromagnetic detection systems. Technology so basic that most species had abandoned it thousands of years ago. Yet somehow, these simple arrays had pierced through Vorthon's stealth shields that had taken centuries to perfect. "Perhaps their equipment is malfunctioning," suggested Valder, hopefully. That hope died as the communication system suddenly crackled to life. Static filled the bridge speakers, followed by a clear voice speaking in heavily accented but perfectly understandable galactic standard. "Unknown vessels. This is Colonel Minho of Earth Defense Command. Please identify yourselves and state your intentions. The entire Vorthen bridge fell silent. Kreshi's red eyes narrowed as he processed what he had just heard. Not only had the humans detected them, but they were communicating in the universal language used by spacefaring civilizations. Across the galaxy, how do they know Galactic Standard? Whispered Navigation Officer Thane. More importantly, Valder added, her voice barely audible, how long have they been listening to our communications? Kresh activated the main view screen, deciding that stealth was no longer an option. The screen flickered to life, revealing what appeared to be a command center that looked surprisingly sophisticated despite its primitive appearance. Banks of monitors displayed tactical information while uniformed. Personnel moved with practiced efficiency. At the center of it all sat a human male who appeared to be in his 40s, short dark hair and remarkably calm brown eyes. He wore what looked like a military uniform, though it seemed far too casual for someone supposedly facing first contact with an alien species. Behind him, other humans worked at their stations with an efficiency that reminded Kresh uncomfortably of his own crew. A woman with shoulder-length black hair, identified by her name tag as Sa Young, monitored what appeared to be communications equipment while speaking quietly into a headset. Beside her, a man called Jamin tracked the positions of the Vorthen ships on a large tactical display, marking their exact coordinates with disturbing accuracy. "I am Admiral Kresh of the Vorthen Dominion," he announced, his voice carrying the authority that had cowed dozens of civilizations. "We come to assess your world's potential for incorporation into our empire." The human Minho leaned back in his chair and took a sip from a steaming cup, as if alien contact was the most normal thing in the universe. "Ah, another assessment," he said with what could only be described as mild amusement. "We're the fourth species this year. Crystalline Accord was here just last month." Kresh felt his blood chill. Other species had been here recently, and the humans spoke about it as casually as discussing the weather. "You might want to check the Galactic Archives." "First," Admiral Minho continued, his tone still friendly, but somehow carrying an undertone that made Kresh's scales prickle. "Search for human conflict protocols. Section 7 Alpha should be particularly educational." "Are you threatening us?" Kresh demanded, his voice rising. Around him, his crew prepared weapon systems, their training taking over despite their confusion. Minho's expression didn't change, simply took another sip of his drink and shook his head slightly. "Not at all, Admiral. Just providing friendly advice." "Coffee?" The casual offer of refreshment to a being who had just announced his intention to conquer their world left the entire Vorthen bridge speechless. In the background, Sa Young spoke into her headset in rapid Korean before switching to what sounded like perfect hegemony dialect, then crystalline harmonic frequencies. "How many languages do your people speak?" Father asked, unable to hide her amazement. Jamin looked up from his tactical display with a slight smile. "All of them, eventually. We're quick learners." Minho set down his cup and leaned forward slightly. "Admiral Kresh, I appreciate directness, so I'll be direct with you. Your ships are impressive, your technology is advanced, and your reputation precedes you. The Vorthen Dominion has conquered 47 star systems in the past decade." It straightened, pleased that his reputation was known even in this backwater system. However, Minho continued, "You might find Earth a bit different from your previous conquests." "We've had some time to prepare." "Prepare for what?" Krush asked, though part of him wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. "For visitors like yourself." Minho gestured to Jamin, who manipulated his display to show a three-dimensional map of the solar system. Red dots marked the positions of the Vorthen ships with perfect accuracy. But more disturbing were the green dots scattered throughout the system. "Those are monitoring stations," Minho explained. "We've been tracking your approach since you entered our outer sensor grid 3 days ago. We know the composition of your hulls, the frequency of your communications, the energy signature of your weapons systems." Valder's tentacles twitched nervously. "Impossible. We maintain communications silence during approach protocols." Sa Young looked up from her station with what might have been sympathy. "You broadcast on 17 different frequencies simultaneously. Your ship's computer systems chatter constantly with status updates. It's actually quite fascinating from a technical standpoint." We've also taken the liberty of analyzing your biological requirements, Jamin added cheerfully. Breathable atmosphere composition, gravitational preferences, dietary needs, standard first contact preparation. Kresh felt the situation slipping out of his control. Every conquest in his career had followed the same pattern. Arrive, demonstrate. Superior technology demands surrender. The conquered species would respond with fear, anger, or desperate defiance. None had ever offered him coffee while casually dissecting his technology. You seem remarkably calm for a species facing conquest, he observed. Minho's smile widened slightly. Admiral, we've been expecting someone like you for quite some time. The galaxy is a big place, but news travels fast. Word gets around about aggressive species expanding their territory. And you're not concerned? Oh, we're very concerned, Minho replied. Concerned enough to do our homework, hence my suggestion about checking those archives. The information there might save us all considerable time and trouble. As if summoned by his words, an alert chimed on Kresh's command console. A priority. Message from Vorthan High Command appeared on his private screen, marked with the highest security classification. The message contained only 3 words. Check the archives. Admiral Kresh sealed himself in his private quarters aboard the Deathbringer, the metallic walls humming with the ship's power systems as he activated the secure terminal. His scaled fingers hesitated over the access codes for the Galactic archives. In his 4 decades of military service, he had never needed to research his enemies before attacking them. The Vorthan way was simple. Arrive, overwhelm, conquer. But something about Colonel Minho's casual confidence gnawed him like a parasite in his mind. The holographic interface materialized before him, displaying the vast database that contained the military records of every spacefaring civilization in the galaxy. Kresh input his command codes and searched for Section 7 Alpha. What he found made his blood freeze in his veins. The first file appeared with a security warning that made his heart skip. Classified Extreme Threat Assessment. Access restricted to Fleet Command level and above. File 001 opened with grainy footage from a Korvax Supremacy battle recorder. The timestamp showed Galactic year 2847, just 12 years ago. Kresh watched as massive Korvax dreadnoughts approached Earth, their plasma cannons charging with enough energy to crack continents. The Korvax were legendary for their overwhelming firepower. Their plasma weapons could melt through armor that took other species centuries to develop. Their ships were mobile fortresses that had conquered 63 worlds without a single defeat. Yet as Kresh watched the footage, his confidence crumbled. The initial bombardment began exactly as expected. Korvax plasma beams lanced down from orbit, striking military installations across Earth's surface. The primitive human bases should have been vaporized instantly. Instead, something impossible happened. Within hours, the humans were firing back. But these weren't the crude projectile weapons Kresh had seen in their training footage. These were Korvax plasma cannons, somehow modified and turned against their original creators. Impossible, Kresh whispered, but the evidence played out. Before his eyes, the file contained a combat report from Fleet Commander Vex High, a Korvax military legend who had never lost a battle. Day 1, orbital bombardment commenced as planned. Human defensive positions eliminated. Day 2, humans began broadcasting on Korvax military frequencies using our own protocols. Day 3, human forces launched counterattack using modified Korvax plasma technology. They turned our own guns against us with frightening precision. Retreat authorized. Kresh's hands shook as he opened the next file. The Nexus Collective had attempted to conquer Earth just 4 years later. The Nexus were even more terrifying than the Korvax because they didn't need to destroy their enemies physically. They simply took control of their minds. The file showed Nexus psionic control ships approaching Earth, their crystalline hulls pulsing with mental energy that could dominate entire civilizations. The Nexus had enslaved hundreds of worlds this way, turning populations into willing servants of their collective consciousness. But the humans had done something unprecedented. Security footage from Seoul, showed a massive battle in the city streets. Nexus-controlled humans marched in perfect formation, their eyes glowing with alien influence. But leading the resistance were two humans identified as Taehyung and Youngya, who somehow moved with the same coordinated precision as the controlled population. "They're using Nexus coordination against the Nexus themselves," breathed Krish. Watching the impossible scene unfold, the file contained panicked reports from Nexus controllers, psionic links compromised, humans reflecting mental domination protocols, control network destabilizing, immediate withdrawal required. A follow-up report was even more chilling. Human subjects designated Taehyung and Youngya demonstrate ability to reverse engineer psionic control methods. They have somehow learned to redirect our mental commands back to our own forces. Is beyond our understanding of neural warfare. File 003 showed the crystalline Accord's attempt to harvest Earth's oceans. The crystalline were silicon-based life forms who could absorb and process vast amounts of water for their growing crystal cities. They had drained 17 worlds of their oceans without resistance. But when they arrived at Earth, they found something waiting for them. The file showed crystalline harvesting ships descending toward Earth's Pacific Ocean, their crystal drills, preparing to extract billions of gallons of water. Operation should have been routine. Instead, the moment the crystalline made contact with Earth's water, their ships began to dissolve. "Contamination detected," reported Crystalline Supervisor Kexthal. Water supplies contain silicon carbide compounds in concentrations lethal to crystalline biology. The humans had somehow known exactly what would kill their silicon-based attackers and had poisoned their own water supply rather than allow it to be harvested. The file contained a transmission from a human commander named Wu Jin. "You want our water? Hope you like poison?" But the most disturbing part was what came next. Within days of the crystalline retreat, Earth's oceans had somehow returned to normal. The humans had developed a way to neutralize their own poison, suggesting they had planned the entire defense from the beginning. Crush scrolled through more files, each one more terrifying than the last. The Swarm Collective had sent billions of insectoid drones to devour Earth's biomass. The humans had somehow learned to communicate with the swarm's queen organisms and had turned the drones against their own hives. The Shadow Syndicate had attempted to infiltrate Earth's governments using shape-shifting assassins. The humans had detected them using methods the Syndicate still didn't understand and had captured several shapeshifters. Worse, they had somehow learned to shapeshift themselves. File after file showed the same pattern. Every species that attacked Earth wasn't just defeated, they were outmaneuvered by human adaptability that bordered on the supernatural. The humans didn't just defend themselves. They learned from every attack and turned their enemies' own weapons and abilities against them. The final file in Section 7 Alpha was a joint statement signed by representatives of 43 different species. The species known as humans of Sol 3 represent an unprecedented threat to conventional warfare. They do not fight like other species. They do not rely on superior technology or numbers. Instead, they adapt to any threat with speed and creativity that defies known biological limits. Every weapon shown to them becomes their weapon. Every tactic used against them becomes their tactic. They learn faster than we can develop new strategies. It is the unanimous recommendation of this council that the human homeworld be classified as a restricted zone. Under no circumstances should any species attempt conquest of Sol 3. The humans do not surrender. They do not retreat. They evolve. Those who ignore this warning do so at their own peril. Kresh leaned back in his chair, his mind reeling. The humans hadn't just defeated 43 different species, they had learned something from each. Encounter that made them stronger for the next one. A soft chime indicated an incoming message. Colonel Minho's face appeared on the screen, still holding that same cup of coffee. "Finished your research, Admiral?" Minho asked pleasantly. Kresh realized with growing horror that the humans had been monitoring his ship's communications. The entire time, they knew exactly what he was reading. "How long have you been watching us?" Kresh asked. Minho's smile was gentle but somehow predatory. "Since the moment you entered our system, Admiral?" We've learned that preparation is the key to survival. Admiral Kresh stared at the holographic files floating before him, each one more disturbing than the last. The pattern was becoming clear, and it terrified him more than facing an entire battle fleet. The humans didn't just win battles, they became stronger with each encounter. Like some kind of biological weapon that fed on conflict itself, File 017 made his scales crawl with dread. The timestamp showed the swarm wars from just 7 years ago. Kresh had heard whispers about this conflict in military circles, but the full details had been classified until now. The footage opened with billions of insectoid creatures descending. On Earth, like a living storm, the swarm was legendary throughout the galaxy, a species that reproduced faster than any military could kill them. Their bioweapons were specifically designed to target mammalian life forms, releasing airborne toxins that could wipe out entire populations within hours. Swarm Queen Zexarita had personally led the invasion, her massive hive ships blotting out the sun as they released clouds of deadly spores into Earth's atmosphere. The bioweapons were perfect killers, engineered over millions of years to destroy any warm-blooded species. But something went wrong within the first day. Security cameras from a research facility in Seoul showed 2 humans working frantically in a laboratory. The man, identified as Sung Ho, wore a simple lab coat stained with chemicals, while the woman, Hai Jin, operated equipment that looked primitive compared to galactic standards. Around them, other humans lay dying from the swarm's bioweapons, coughing blood as their respiratory systems shut down. Yet somehow, impossibly, these 2 humans weren't affected. "Look at this," Kresh muttered, zooming in on the footage. Within 36 hours of the initial attack, Sung-ho and Hai-jin had not only developed immunity boosters that saved thousands of lives, but they had created something far more terrifying. Files showed swarm drones suddenly turning on their own queens, their compound eyes flashing with unnatural light as they attacked the very hive structures they were meant to protect. The bioweapon that was supposed to kill humans had somehow been turned into a retroviral weapon that rewrote the swarm's genetic programming. They turned the swarm's own biology against them, Kresh whispered in disbelief. The final transmission from Swarm Queen Zexarita was a desperate plea to her surviving hives. "Retreat immediately. The humans have corrupted our bioweapons. They learn faster than we can adapt. This species is beyond our understanding." But it was File 023 that truly shattered Kresh's confidence. The Phantom Legion represented the most feared force in the galaxy, energy beings that existed between dimensions, creatures that could possess any living consciousness and turn entire populations into their willing slaves. The footage from this encounter seemed impossible. The Phantom Legion had materialized over major Earth cities, their ethereal forms flickering between the visible spectrum like living ghosts. These beings had conquered worlds by simply possessing the minds of their inhabitants, turning civilizations against themselves. The attack began exactly as expected. Phantom entities descended from their dimensional ships, their energy forms, seeking human hosts to possess. In London, millions of people suddenly stopped what they were doing, their eyes glowing with alien intelligence as the phantoms took control. But in a research facility in Busan, to humans named Jinwoo and Mi Young were doing something unprecedented. Instead of fleeing or fighting the possession, they were studying it. The file showed Ginwoo connected to strange electromagnetic equipment, while Gin monitored energy readings on primitive computers. As phantom entities attempted to possess them, the equipment somehow trapped the energy beings in electromagnetic fields. "Impossible," Kresh breathed, watching the footage. "Can't trap pure energy." But the humans had done exactly that. Within hours, they had not only learned to resist phantom possession, but had weaponized the trapped entities. The file showed Phantom Legion commanders receiving reports of their own soldiers being turned against them, their energy forms somehow redirected by human technology. A legion. Commander's final report was chilling. "The humans have found a way to trap our essence. In electromagnetic prisons, they are using our own soldiers as ammunition against us. This defies everything we know about energy-based consciousness. Immediate withdrawal authorized." The pattern was becoming terrifyingly clear. Every species that attacked Earth made the same mistake. They showed the humans their capabilities. And somehow, impossibly, the humans learned to not just counter those abilities, but to use them better than their original creators. File after file revealed the same story. The Crystal Collective had tried to turn Earth's minerals into weapons, only to find humans had learned to grow crystals that could pierce collective armor. The metal merchants had attempted to steal Earth's resources using their shape-shifting robot armies. The humans had somehow reprogrammed the robots and turned them into a defense force. The Shadow Syndicate had sent their best assassins to eliminate Earth's leaders. But the humans had not only detected the shapeshifters, but had learned to shapeshift themselves. The file contained blurry photographs of human agents infiltrating Syndicate bases using stolen shapeshifting technology. Most disturbing of all was the Temporal Collective's attempt to erase humanity from history by traveling back in time. The file was heavily redacted, but the few surviving reports suggested the humans had somehow detected the time travelers and had sent their own agents back to counter them. The temporal war that followed had apparently convinced the Collective to classify Earth as a paradox zone, where time travel was forbidden. Kresh reached the final document in Section 7 Alpha, a joint declaration that made his blood run cold. Representatives from 43 different species had signed their names to a statement that read like a warning from beyond the grave. The species known as humans represents an evolutionary anomaly that defies conventional understanding of biological development. They do not wage war in any recognizable pattern. Instead, they treat each conflict as a learning opportunity, adapting to threats with speed that borders on the supernatural. Every attack against them teaches them something new. Every weapon used against them becomes their weapon. Every strategy employed against them becomes their strategy. They are individually weak by galactic standards, but collectively they represent the most dangerous adaptive intelligence we have encountered. Humans do not surrender when faced with superior force. They do not retreat when outnumbered. Do not despair when facing extinction. Instead, they evolve. They adapt. They learn, and they remember. It is our unanimous recommendation that the human homeworld be designated as a restricted zone under the Galactic Warfare Convention. Any species that attempts conquest of Sal-3 does so without support from the galactic community and at their own extreme peril. We have tested humanity's limits. We have found none. Avoid Earth at all costs. The signatures included names that made Kresh weak with fear. The hegemony, who had never retreated from any world. The Razor clans, who showed mercy to no one. The Void Hunters, who had eliminated entire star systems. Even the ancient architects, being so old they had watched galaxies form, had signed their warning. As Kresh stared at the document, his hands trembling, the chamber door hissed open. Sub-Commander Valder entered, her purple skin pale with stress. "Admiral," she said quietly, "Earth Defense Command is requesting communication. Colonel Minho says it's time for the next phase of negotiations." Kresh looked at his aide, then back at the files floating before him. Every species that had ignored these warnings had learned the hard way why Earth remained unconquered. "Him through," Kresh said, his voice barely above a whisper, "and prepare the retreat coordinates." "Sir, just do it, Valder. We're not the first to make this mistake, but if we're smart, we might be among the few to survive it." The bridge of the Deathbringer felt different now as Admiral Kresh activated the main view screen. The same human face appeared, Colonel Minho, still sitting in his command chair with that infuriating cup of coffee. But now Kresh saw something else in those dark eyes, the patient gaze of a predator who had been playing with his food. "Finished your research, Admiral?" Minho asked, his voice carrying the same pleasant tone as before. Behind him, the command center bustled with activity that no longer looked primitive to Kresh's trained eye. The woman, Sol Young, was operating communications equipment that he now realized was far more sophisticated than it appeared. Her fingers danced over controls that were probably monitoring every electronic signal from his fleet. Beside her, Jamin studied tactical displays showing the exact positions of every Vorthan ship, their weapon systems, shield frequencies, and crew complements. You knew we would investigate the archives, Kresh said, his voice heavy with the weight of understanding. Of course, Minho replied, taking another casual sip of his coffee. Every species does. The hegemony spent 3 days reading files before they decided to leave. The Razor clans made it through about half the documents before they changed their minds. It's much more efficient than fighting, don't you think? Kresh watched as other humans moved through the command center with practiced efficiency. None of them looked particularly threatening. They were smaller than Vorthons, lacking natural armor or claws, breathing a simple oxygen-nitrogen mixture that would kill most galactic species. Yet he now understood that their greatest weapon wasn't their biology, it was their minds. Though I should mention, Minho continued conversationally, while you were reading those fascinating historical accounts, our research teams finished analyzing your ship's energy signatures. Fascinating shield harmonics, by the way. Very elegant design. Kresh felt ice form in his veins. What do you mean? Minho gestured to someone off-screen. A young woman with short black hair appeared, holding a tablet device. Wait. Well, we win with the war. From our technology division, she's been studying Vorthon engineering for the past few hours. Tae-young smiled brightly, as if discussing the weather. Your shield generators operate on a rotating frequency pattern to prevent overload. Very clever. But the rotation creates a momentary vulnerability every 4.7 seconds when the frequency shifts. A precisely timed electromagnetic pulse could collapse your entire defensive grid.
Elders.
Sub-Commander Valder's tentacles twitched nervously at her station. Impossible. Our shields have protected us for centuries. They're excellent shields. Tae-young agreed. We've learned a lot from studying them. Thank you for the educational opportunity. Another human appeared on screen, a middle-aged man in a lab coat. I'm Kyung-ho from our biochemistry department, he said, with the enthusiasm of someone discussing a hobby. We've been analyzing the atmospheric composition of your ships. Fascinating respiratory requirements. It turns out that Vorthon physiology has a very specific reaction to certain synthesized bacteria. Completely harmless to us, but it would cause your immune systems to shut down within hours. Kresh gripped his command chair so tightly his claws left gouges in the metal. You're threatening us. What? Not at all, Minho said, his tone remaining infuriatingly pleasant. We're just sharing our research findings. Purely academic interest. You understand? We find alien biology fascinating. Viewscreen split to show multiple humans working at various stations. A man named Sang-woo was reading what looked like complete technical specifications for Vorthon warp drives, shield generators, and weapon systems. He looked up and waved cheerfully at the camera. Your ships are beautifully designed, Admiral, Sang-woo said. We've particularly enjoyed studying your targeting computers. The algorithms are quite sophisticated, though we noticed a few improvements. That could increase accuracy by about 12%. Another human, a woman called Yoon-ji, appeared to be running tactical simulations on her computer. We've been modeling theoretical engagement scenarios, she explained with scientific detachment, based on your fleet composition and weapon configurations. We estimate a 73.6% probability of successful defense if hostilities were to commence. Those are very good odds, Minho noted approvingly, though they assume you're fighting a conventional enemy. We've learned that conventional thinking has certain limitations. Kresh looked around his bridge at his own crew. These were hardened warriors who had conquered 47 star systems, veterans of countless battles against species far more physically powerful than humans. Yet they were staring at the view screen with the kind of fear usually reserved for natural disasters. Admiral, came a voice from behind him. Communications officer next was monitoring multiple channels, his expression growing more troubled by the moment. I'm detecting unusual activity from the human communication networks. They're broadcasting on frequencies we use for internal ship communications. They're inside our network, Valder whispered. Her purple skin turning almost white. Minho's expression remained friendly. I hope you don't mind. We needed to run some diagnostic tests on your systems. Don't worry, we haven't changed anything important. Just gathering data for our research. The implications hit Krish like a physical blow. While he had been reading about humanity's past victories, they had been dissecting his fleet's defenses in real time. Every second he had spent in the archives. They had been learning how to defeat him. Now Minho continued. I'm offering you a choice, Admiral. You can test your fleet against our primitive defenses and see how well you fare against an enemy that has been studying you for hours. Or you can accept our trade proposal. He paused to take another sip of coffee, as if the fate of an entire fleet was a minor detail. We make excellent coffee, as you can see. Our steel alloys are apparently quite popular with the Centauri Republic. And our information networks are always interested in sharing technological innovations with friendly species. Through the view screen, Kresh could see the true nature of the human command center. These weren't primitive beings cowering before superior technology. They were researchers, scientists, and strategists who had turned the art of warfare into a science. Every alien species that had attacked them had simply provided new data for their experiments. What are your trade terms? Kresh asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Minho's smile widened, and for the first time, Kresh saw something genuinely warm in his expression. Now that's the spirit of cooperation we like to see. Sala, please transmit our standard trade agreement to Admiral Kresh's fleet. A new human appeared on screen, a young woman with a bright smile. The trade package includes technology sharing agreements, cultural exchange programs, and access to our research networks. We're particularly interested in your shield harmonics and biological data, if you're willing to share. This is the beginning of a beautiful friendship, Admiral Minho said, raising his coffee cup in what might have been a toast. Welcome to the community of species that have chosen cooperation over conflict. As the transmission ended, Kresh slumped in his command chair, the weight of realization crushing down on him. The humans hadn't just defeated 43 different species, they had learned something from each encounter that made them stronger. They were like a galactic immune system, adapting to every threat and incorporating it into their defenses. Navigation, he said quietly. Set course for the nearest trade station, sir, Valder asked, confused. We're not conquerors here, Kresh explained, his voice heavy with newfound understanding. We're students. And if we're very lucky, we might learn enough from them to survive our next encounter with a species that doesn't offer coffee and friendship. Deathbringer and its escort ships changed course, their weapon systems powering down for the first time in decades. Behind them, Earth continued its slow rotation, a small blue world that had redefined the very concept of strength in the galaxy. Admiral, Kresh finally understood the galaxy's unspoken rule. You don't attack Earth, not because humans are strong, but because they're human. Humans don't just survive, they evolve, adapt, and turn every challenge into an opportunity to become something greater than they were before. The Vorthan Dominion had just become the 44th species to learn that humanity's greatest defense wasn't their technology or their weapons. It was their ability to learn. The end.